Welcome to Business Brains and the Bottom Line. My name is Paul D'Allegro, your host, and my guest today is John LaBrie from Nutanix. Welcome to the show, John.
Thanks, Paul. It's great to be here.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. So, John, you're an industry veteran, and in no way am I saying that you're old. So I want to get that right out on the table. I know you are an industry veteran. You've been in the industry a long time, and the subject matter today I want to talk about. We both talk to a lot of customers about data protection, and under that umbrella, there's a lot to it, obviously, right? So, many companies think, well, hey, I back up my data. Isn't that good enough? So I'll throw that right out because that's the obvious one. That's the low-hanging fruit, right? Well, we can get in a little bit more detail later on. But what's your take on data protection?
Well, like anything, there's a lot more to it than just backup, right? Backup
Correct.
is part of it, right? I mean, data protection spans the entire IT organization and affect the entire business when you get down to it, right? If you think about things, everything from user passwords, right, to how often or how you enforce user password discipline, for lack of a better term.
Yep.
Security is not convenient, right? It's just a fact. And it's amazing. The majority of breaches and things start with a user, right? It starts with someone putting a sticky note or doing a password that's very simple to crack with a dictionary, right? Attack or something like that. So my point here is you got to start with basic security practices, and then you have to determine, well, backup. So why are you backing up the data to begin with? So it's very funny. Most customers, right, where is your data? Before you decide to back it up, do you even know where it exists?
Yeah, that's because usually a good start, right?
Right, because today data sprawl is everywhere. You've got it on handheld devices, right? You've got it laptops, tablets. People bring in BYOD is the way it is these days, which was interesting because when I started as an industry veteran, as you say, you didn't bring anything, right?
Yeah,
if it wasn't blessed.
Yeah, I know. I'll throw this out there. When I started years ago in sales, we didn't even have laptops. We didn't even have email. I know I'm aging myself, but it's quite a lot has changed. And to your point, a lot of data is being generated daily from all different mediums, right? Phones, laptops, company data, and it's the age-old question is how do you protect all that?
Right, and so you need to have a methodology that number one can protect all those sources. And two, then you have to decide what you're going to do. So backup is great for things like data recovery, long-term retention when you lose data. That's really the function of backup, right? It is to allow you to recover that which was lost because someone like me deleted it, right? I mean, let's be honest. I mean, mistakes happen, right? And that's where backup's really cool because backup is a technology, right? And there's a whole host of vendors that do this, but it allows you to do things like single file recovery, right? Where I can just go in and type the name of the file that I screwed up, and then I can magically find 50 copies of it that are kept from yesterday and beyond, right? And the point here is that's a wonderful thing for single file recovery for end users, right? But is that enough to meet the business requirements for business continuity, which is where disaster recovery comes in versus backup, right?
Correct. So that's the next phase of this is every company is going to be different depending on size, requirements. And so I'm going to throw a couple of terms out there, RPO and RTO, recovery point objective and recovery time objective. And those are going to be different for every customer, right? Depending on, like you say, the business requirements. Talk about that a little bit, John.
That's right. Yeah. Those of us in IT, right, we don't get to dictate these things. We are the enforcers or the administrators or the people who make it happen, right? So when the business says to you and I, listen, this application, right, is our ERP application and we need that thing. We can't, by the way, RPO, recovery point objective, I should get that on the table. And RTO is recovery time objective. So RPO is basically how much data are you willing to lose? Right. If something happens and I have to go to a backup, how far back in time is acceptable before I go, I can't recover from that? And to your point, this can vary from seconds or milliseconds in the financial world, right? The trading world, to some cases days.
That's correct.
Right? Or even a week, right? I mean, depending on what the workload is. So it'll vary across the application. And those recovery points are basically your backups, a single recovery point in time, if you will. Now, recovery time objective is how quickly can you actually bring business operations back when you've lost them, So RTO is basically how quickly can I get the lights on and operational again? How long does it take me to get IT up and running? And recovery point objective is at what point will the data be on that infrastructure when I bring it up?
Correct. Thanks for the definition, John. That's
Sure.
why I threw it back to you. You explained it a lot better than I could, by the way.
Thanks. It's the world in which I live.
Yeah, exactly. So to your point, every company, I like to throw extreme examples out, like someone like American Airlines, right? Nike, like these big, their RTO and RPO are probably within seconds, right? They can't afford, for every second that they're down, it's costing them millions, right? Versus we have customers that we have these discussions with them. They say, we can afford to be down a couple of days. It's not going to really hurt our business. We're not mission critical. We don't need anything. And that's okay, because the shorter that number gets of days and time, the more expensive it gets to recover and restore that data. So, and then again, fortunately or unfortunately, there's a price tag on all of these, correct?
Absolutely. And that's really why it's driven by the business, because at the end of the day, you have to understand what is the value of the thing you're insuring, because that'll tell you if what you're spending is reasonable, right? You're not going to insure a $1 million asset for $2 million a year. That just doesn't work, right? On the other hand, are you going to spend $2 million a year to insure $200 million of asset? Probably, right? And it would be very, very adept to do that. Now, by the way, so get back to American Airlines, like you say. So when you look at things like replication, right? Replication is taking a copy of data and sending it to another location, right? Which is a very smart thing to do, right? This is how you enable, backup at remote places and DR at remote places. So we use replication technologies, and there are two types at a high level. There's synchronous and asynchronous. Now, synchronous is just like it sounds. The two sides are synced. It's live. It's actually application level replication. Things like Active Directory sync is a synchronous replication, right? SRDF in the VMware world, right? That's synchronous replication. So when you do synchronous replication, it's for workloads that cannot tolerate any data loss, to your point. Amex or American Airlines, I keep saying Amex, I'm sorry. American Airlines, to your point, if they lose a second of data, that's a big deal, right? So same with financial industries, right? The trading floors. So what they do is they spend big time money on synchronous replication, which means you have to have hot infrastructure running in both locations and replication going on all the time. Now, asynchronous is for the rest of us. You know what? I can survive an hour or a half hour or 15 minutes or 3 hours or 8 hours of data loss without it being catastrophic, right? And for those, you use asynchronous technology, where you take a snapshot and you see literally like a picture of the machine, and then you take that as a backup file and you send it somewhere, right? And replication is the mechanism by which we send it somewhere. But the scheduling of that, does it happen every hour? Does it happen every 4 hours, every 8 hours? By the way, that's your RPO. Right. That's asynchronous, right? Versus the world of high transactional volume environments like airlines and banks and trading floors.
Sure.
Synchronous is where it's at, and they spend big money.
Yeah. So in a synchronous environment, would the objective there be if you have a disaster on one side, you can immediately spin it up on the disaster recovery side? Is that, am I understand that correctly?
Exactly. I mean, the terms high availability are used for environments like this. And when I say HA, that's exactly what I mean. I mean, you don't even know we had an outage as an end user.
Right.
And that takes significant infrastructure and technology to make happen. It's totally doable in this day and age. But to your point, the more you're mitigating, the greater the cost.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. We like to tell our customers, we like to keep that as short as possible so we can make more money. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But no, you got to be objective, right? Like I've had customers say, we can rebuild that data. It's not going to put us out of business. We can, because when they look at the price tag of what it costs to get to an active environment, like you say, an HA environment, they look at the price tag and they go, maybe not.
Right. And that's why, async exists, right? For the rest of us who say, listen, I can't take a lot of loss, but I don't need to spend the kind of money where I have to have literally a mirror of my environment somewhere else running. And by the way, you also have to have a network to carry that,
Yes.
right?
So
that all
variables
goes together. And in those environments, you typically have redundancy. This is why SD-WAN exists, right? Redundancies. SD-WAN is awesome, right? Because it enables businesses to do things in a much more robust way than they could, intelligently too, by the way, right? Because SD-WAN, right, knows what type of data circuit it's running over. Is it, cellular? Is it Wi-Fi? Is it microwave, right? Meaning different bandwidths than public Wi-Fi. Is it MPLS? Is it internet? And it can mix those all together into one big pipe and then logically send the packets where they belong so that businesses who are doing replication aren't stepping on their voice traffic, right? So all these pieces come in together when you start thinking about the ultimate goal, which is business continuity, right? The whole purpose for backup and DR, especially DR, is keep the lights on.
Yeah. Yeah. So another question I had for you, John, is, how many copies of data should a company keep? There's a lot of, I see a nod there. So, what's your thoughts on that? Yeah.
And then this goes back again to the risk, right? So sometimes it will be dictated for you, right? If you have regulations in the environment in which you work that say you must keep this many copies, right? 3 copies, or you must keep a copy of data for 7 years, right? A lot of times it's dictated by regulations. Many times it's dictated by the chief risk officer in the company, right? In larger enterprises, you'll have a chief risk officer, and that person's job is to literally mitigate the risk for the business across a broad spectrum, right? The entire spectrum of the business. And so, when you look at kind of a minimum of 2, right?
Yeah.
But the key here is you don't want to keep the second copy anywhere near where you physically are keeping your first.
That's
one.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. So, and if I'm an enterprise, I'd keep 3. I personally keep 3.
Yeah.
Myself.
That's kind of what we tell our customers, by the way, the 3-2-1 theory.
You got
3
it.
copies, 2 in different mediums, and 1 completely offsite. So
that's right.
You should be covered unless, again.
And in today's world, we have this wonderful thing called cloud, and public cloud specifically for long-term retention is a wonderful thing. And I have no allegiance to any public cloud, but I can tell you, I hate tape. Okay, so if
people are still buying it though, John. It's amazing. I'm stunned by that.
They must have had better experience with it than I did. That's all I can say, because I've never had any. Well, I used to do manual splicing of tape, so I just dated myself. But my experience with tape has been nothing more than heartache and disappointment in me not being able to deliver what I was supposed to do as my IT role. Whereas cloud object storage is inexpensive. It's far away, so I'm not going to suffer any local outage that can take that with me. And you can have different tiers of it, right? Based upon your requirements. You want it worm, right? Write once, read many, right? Those are, by the way, immutable copies that can't be impacted with malware. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff there that's very reasonably priced nowadays. And that's, by the way, backup, right? So I just want to be clear about what we're talking about. This is taking data, unstructured data, right, and sending it to object storage in the public cloud remotely, which is a no-brainer for your third copy.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Think about it. If you have to buy all the infrastructure, set that all up. I mean, and again, another thing we haven't touched on is the talent that you have on your staff to manage all that. A lot of companies are struggling with who they have on the bench and the talents they have. So it may be just easier to send that backup copy to the cloud.
Yeah, that's very true, Paul. You're spot on. I mean, keeping talent is hard right now, right? Especially if it's good talent. It tends to be what's the word, in high demand. So, by the way, an S3 Amazon S3 is a pretty standard object store methodology, if you will. And there are a bunch of different vendors out there who allow you to take your local backups and then send them out to S3. Right. And so it doesn't, it's just a different target. That's really the beauty of it. It's just a different target. It's no different than pointing to tape, except thank God it's not tape. And so, to your point, it's very easy to set up an account, an AWS account to receive that, or pick Azure or Google Cloud, whatever you want to do. Right.
Yeah. We got to be neutral on this show, John. We got to give all the vendors the love,
That's right. I'm with you. Right. I just, as a standard, S3 was the first one out there. So
and those are the big boys, right? The Amazons, the Googles, and
there's a plethora of opportunities for businesses large and small now to store data remotely.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So data protect, when I hear data protection is a big umbrella, right? And you touched on a couple of things from a security standpoint. How do we protect data from being hit with ransomware?
Well, that's a big one, and that's
it is a big one.
That's a multi-layered answer.
I hesitated to ask it, but I had to ask it because it's part of it, question. Right?
Well, and yeah. So number one, the simple answer is enforce strict passwords, meaning no words, upper and lower case, numeric, and special characters as a mandate. By the way, I'm a fan of 12 characters. Everybody looks at me like I fell off a truck when I say that. 12 characters, if you do that, it's the first good step you can make. And by the way, they can't be written down either, right? Use a password manager, right? Password managers are key. A lot of the compromises that have happened are because, okay, let's just take a step back. I'm a person. I get this, right? Hey, can I just use the same password everywhere? No, but it's easier. Yes, It is. But if I get that password, I get everything you own. And that's the same thing that's happened in some IT departments. They've been using the same password, or gosh forbid, they didn't even get rid of the default root passwords on servers, and malware got them, and then it went horizontal. Now, so if you had good password enforcement and discipline, that wouldn't happen. It wouldn't be able to take hold. But if it takes hold, the first thing malware does is what? It starts probing. It wants to go horizontal in your environment, starts harping to see what's available. And then they start trying to exploit those servers, because odds are if you allow a poor password, I was going to use a different word, poor password on a server, you probably allow it on multiple servers. And so that's how it goes horizontal. And then there'll be an incubation time while the malware does its thing, and then everything gets encrypted and you get the notice. And that incubation time depends on how successful they are in going horizontal and getting other targets, right? If they don't get many targets, they tend to reduce that time because they don't want to get detected and be mitigated. My point here is, if you get infected with malware, the second piece is you need to know that it happened. Okay, so how do you know that it happened? Well, you should have some security infrastructure in your environment to do this, right? And there's all sorts of different tools available to do this, right?
Yeah, we'll save that for another show, because we could go on for hours about that.
But the key here is this: you need to have a copy that is clean somewhere remote, so that you can recover in event that it does happen, right? And that's the key, is to have clean copies, because once a machine has been infected by malware, if I'm able to take a snapshot of it, that is now an infected snapshot. Now, it's not going to crawl horizontal in the replication stream, or it's not going to go horizontal at the DR site, because these are immutable snapshots. But the point is, it's worthless to me as a snapshot because it's been
corrupted. Yeah, no, completely agree. I had something to ask you, John, and now I'm drawing a blank. We'll probably have to cut that one out. I know what I'm to say. So I actually use a password manager that auto-generates passwords. So that's one way. And I think that
I do too.
A lot of our customers are starting to go to MFA now, multi-factor authentication. So that's another.
I use MFA with my password manager.
That's right. So those are two great solutions, I think.
Absolutely, Paul. And to your point, everybody's carrying one of these days, right? So it's not a big deal to do MFA, right? When we used to have to do it with a dedicated device, it was a pain in the butt because we also had a pager with that and then a cell phone. So you have three things. But now that you can do MFA on a phone and everybody has the phone anyway, to me, it's almost inexcusable not to do that.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, the passwords program that you were talking about, I have it on all my devices.
Me too.
So if I change my a password and I update it on my laptop, it's all web based, so I can just get them from anywhere. So some people complain, oh, how am I going to remember that 12 digit with characters? It's really, you got to remember one password now. So I love that program. I won't say which one I use, because again, we're trying to be neutral here, but a lot of good ones out there.
Yep. To me, it's one of the best things you can do. My wife is horrible, right? God love her. She's horrible with passwords, right? She writes them down. To my chagrin, I got her a password manager. Life is good again. And now she has different passwords. I mean, when you think about it, how many apps, how many things do you sign into?
Hundreds.
Right. You
Literally
can't
hundreds.
be using the same password.
Yeah, no.
Right? And the vast majority of people do.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just funny. I had a conversation with someone I work with this week. I say, hey, where do you store your passwords? They go, in an Excel spreadsheet.
A notepad.
And I was like, I sent them the link to the password program that I use. I said, you should probably get this.
Yes. By the way, the small amount of money you'll spend on it is worth every penny.
Yeah. Right? I think the one I have is $30 a year.
How can you say no?
I mean, and it's great. It's convenient. Yeah. And the thing is, a lot of times you don't have to, for the people out there that are thinking about this, you don't have to type the word, the password, and just copy and paste. That's and right. It makes it easy, right? And then,
and you can even tell it how sophisticated you want your passwords to be, right? Correct. So do you want it to be 23 characters or whatever? Great, have at it. By the way, the more characters, the better.
Yep. I'm waiting for the day where it does like DNA testing to log in, right? So it knows it's me. I don't know, some way you put something up to your arm and it says, cool. Yeah, biometric. It knows who you are and says, "Up, you're not Paul D here."
Yep. So a biometric with something else, right? Who I am and something I have. There you go. Right. That's much better than where we are in most places today. But MFA is getting much more widespread, I would say. So I'm a fan of that. And anybody out there listening who has users who push back on this, the answer, the alternative is really not acceptable.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, once your data has been taken, and once all the stuff that you want to keep secure has been spread out into the wild, into the dark web, your life will never be the same.
Yeah. I had a CISO on not that long ago. And we both agreed that the biggest threat vector is email, right? Spoofing, phishing, all that other stuff.
Just double click without thinking.
Yeah. So I try to tell everyone, I never click on a link in an email. I shouldn't say never, but
you need to know who it's coming. If you know who it's coming from, it's different. But you always got to check that the name, not the name, but hover over the name and check out the email address. Does it even match? In many cases, it won't, and that's the big flag that says, "Don't do this. Someone's impersonating Paul."
Yeah, if it's a bank, sometimes they'll throw one extra character in there, and it'll look like. And if you look close, so I tell people never. So I've gotten emails supposedly from my bank that, we have a message for you. You need to go in and click on this link and log in and answer this message or what have you. Then I actually don't do that. I go actually to the web address. I log in, there's nothing there.
Right.
So someone's trying to get your password to your bank. So lessons out there, never click on a link in an email.
Well said.
Couldn't have said it any better. So, well, John, tell me a little bit about what you're up to these days. You're working for Nutanix.
Yes.
And you're in Utah. How's life in Utah treating you?
Life in Utah is treating me well. It's actually a nice day out there today. A little chilly, but it should be this time of year. Yeah, I work for Nutanix as a Xi sales specialist. So what I do is I basically am an SE and a sales guy combined for this role. And Nutanix customers are able to buy a service from Nutanix where they can subscribe to the Nutanix cloud, and it's DR as a service offering where we literally have infrastructure waiting for them and they're replicating to it, and they can fail over within minutes to a live environment in Xi to recover from stuff that happens on-prem, right? It's literally DR as a service.
Kind of what we talked about earlier about having that easy button just, in an active HA environment where they're on-prem. Something happens on-prem, they can flip a switch and keep the business running in the cloud. What does Nutanix do? What's their prime solution that you guys sell? Just to kind of, I know, but for the people out there, what do you guys do?
Sure. So Nutanix is it's a computing platform, right? We're a software company. So what we are is a computing platform upon which you can layer your IT infrastructure virtually. We support every hypervisor out there. So ESX, ESXi.
Yep.
We have our own called AHV. You can run Hyper-V on us. We are completely hardware agnostic as well. You can run us on a variety of hardware: HP, Lenovo, Dell, Fujitsu, Supermicro, etc.
Sure.
And then what you do is you buy your hardware, you put Nutanix platform on top of it, and then you take your hypervisor of choice and instantiate your workloads on Nutanix. And it's a hyper-converged infrastructure, so no more three-tiered environment like we've been used to for so long. It basically all converged. Storage becomes a pool. It's very easy to manage, very easy to scale. And what Nutanix has done is just basically make it easy to build world-class IT infrastructure. And this thing that I sell called Leap, which is this DR as a service offering, is actually an extension of built-in replication and recovery technology that's in the Acropolis operating system. That's the Nutanix platform. It's built in DR into Nutanix, and my service offering is just one of the 6 ways you can take advantage of it. So that's Nutanix. It's a platform.
Yeah, no, we're big fans of your company. Obviously, I'm having you on the show, or I wouldn't have had you on there. But when we talk to our customers in general about hyperconverged, one of my SEs, Justin Richards, says, they've almost got to convince me why they wouldn't at least consider hyperconverged in this day and age, because the 3-tier architecture is just more to manage. A
lot more work.
Integration is a lot harder. So with one single platform that does compute, storage, networking, it's just so much simpler.
Plus, it's web scale, so you don't have to buy 3 to 5 years of infrastructure that you're not even using right on year one and grow into it. No, and in this environment, right, you just pay as you go, right? I call them Lego blocks, right? Yeah. You need a yellow one, great. Need a red one, yeah. A white one, a blue one, great. Just they plug in, and the whole thing becomes one scalable entity, if you will. It's to me, to your point. Well, by the way, there's a reason Google invented this technology, right? In terms of web scale, right? There's a reason. It's because the old way was not going to do it. Yeah. It couldn't scale.
It's funny. I remember when hyperconverged first came out, would meet with people, and the storage admins in the room would be like, okay, if we buy this, what will I do from here? I go, well, we can the company can redeploy. If you're good, they'll find a spot for you. But that was one of the first responses we would get.
Well, that was kind of like, the first lighter that was created. Everybody else selling matches is like, hey, what am I going to do? But, it's a better mousetrap at the end of the day. If I was building an IT infrastructure, are you kidding me? No brainer. Right?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think as sales folks, our job is to make life easier and simpler for our customers. I've always said that, right? We want to take the risk away so that they don't get fired if there's some sort of an outage, if they have a proper plan in place. Well, we've all heard, I think it was Target a few years ago got severely breached, right? And that CIO lost his job, and yep. I don't know all the details there, but they clearly didn't have a plan in place.
Oh, and failure to have a plan is planning to fail. Let's be honest. And that's the whole thing. When you talk about this whole thing of backup and DR, the thing about backup is that a lot of people think that equals DR, and it doesn't. And they find out the hard way. And by the way, the biggest challenge that people have in IT is the people. So if I'm the director of IT, it's my job, right? Yeah. To provide whatever the business needs for IT. And if the business thinks they have DR and all we have is backup, to your point, my job is at risk if we ever have to have if we have a DR event, because it's going to be a long time to recover from backups in a DR scenario, because what that's missing is the infrastructure upon which to recover. Backup is great. You've got the files, you've got the data. What are you going to load it on?
Yeah, that's exactly right. All the applications.
That's the thing, right? Yeah, applications got to be. But first thing, you have to have infrastructure that you boot up, and then you have applications that you install on top of them, and then you restore the data, right? And then you conduct your user acceptance testing, and then the lights are on. But my point is, if you don't have the infrastructure upon which to do that, all bets are off, and you have no decent recovery time objective in that environment. So that's why backup and DR coexist. They don't substitute one another. That's now, correct. Right? If you have to do one versus the other, the one thing I will say, in my opinion, is I would do DR, and it's not because I sell a DR as a service offering. Remember, you can do it on your own. You don't have to buy my service. The point here is DR can cover backup. Backup can't cover DR. Now, I want to be clear about that, right? Because with backup, right, I've got single file recovery. With DR, do you have it? No, but you can mount that VM and log into it and go find the file. It's not as elegant as searching the name of the file and getting it, but on the other hand, you've got the data. Now, I still want both if I have my choice, just to be very clear out there. I would love to, if I'm an IT director, CIO, CTO, I am definitely having backup and DR. Why? Because they solve two different functions, right? One's keeping the lights on, the other's allowing my users to recover from day-to-day whoops, and allowing me to stick stuff out there long-term to meet all my retention requirements for the industry in which I operate.
Well said, John. Stephen Bishop, who put us in contact, said you'd be a great guest, and I would say he's right, John. You've got a nice way about you, and I appreciate you coming on the show. So before we end, any last words of wisdom for the audience out there?
No, I mean, protect yourself, back up your data. Most importantly, listen to the business requirements, right? In IT, as if we follow the business requirements, we can then deliver the services that meet their expectations. But make sure that you're on the same page, because what I found a lot of times recently in the last couple of years is that I run into people where there's a disconnect there, and it's important not to have a disconnect there, right? I mean, I'd rather have no DR plan at all than have a business that thinks I have one and I don't.
Yeah, no, and you touched on something. Leadership really needs to know, just because you have backup doesn't mean that you have a DR strategy. And I think that's where the gap is sometimes.
That's correct. They're like, are we backing up our data? Yes, but I can't put it on anything. Yeah, and that's our job as IT professionals to illuminate that, to your point. So that's very valid.
Cool. Well, hey, John, again, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. And until next time, that's a wrap for Business Brains and the Bottom Line. Paul Delagro signing off.